Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
And my name is Chris Huddleston.
And today, we're doing video again. I'm not going to keep repeating it like it's new, although it is new, and we're excited. Today, we're very excited to be talking to you about a cult classic. Today, we are very excited to be talking to you about the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
You've seen all kinds of movies, but you've never seen anything like the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Let's do the time warp again. Let's do the time warp again.
The Rocky Horror Picture Show is wonderfully weird.
I'm your new commander. You now are my prisoner.
They're probably foreigners with ways different than our own.
It's fabulously freaky. It's a trip to transsexual Transylvania. The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Transsexual Transylvania.
The story is strange.
But tonight is the night that my beautiful creature is destined to be born.
The songs are super.
Science fiction.
The scenery is smashing. The cast is completely crazy.
This isn't the Junior Chamber of Commerce, Brad.
There's a mad scientist named Frank N. Furter.
Come up to the lab and see what's on the slab.
And Rocky, his incredible creature.
I knew he was in with a bad crowd, but it was worse than I imagined.
A sinister servant named Riffraff.
I remember doing the time warp.
And Brad and Janet.
My name's Brad Majors.
Just a couple of clean-cut kids.
This is my fiancée, Janet Weiss.
Touch it, touch it, touch it, touch me. I wanna be dirty.
Eddie. Magenta.
When shall we return to Transylvania, huh?
Columbia. Dr. Scott.
Great Scott!
So give yourself over to absolute pleasure. See the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Let's do the time warp again.
All right, so you hadn't seen this. Well,
Synopsis.
Synopsis, man.
All right. In this cult classic, Sweethearts, Brad, Barry Bostwick, which this is our second Barry Bostwick film. We did Megaforce. And Janet, Susan Sarandon, stuck with a flat tire during a storm, discovered the eerie mansion of Dr. Frankenfurter, Tim Curry, a transvestite scientist. As their innocence is lost, Brad and Janet meet a house full of wild characters, including a rocking biker, Meatloaf, and a creepy butler, Richard O'Brien. Through elaborate dances and rock songs, Frankenfurter unveils his latest creation, a muscular man named Rocky.
I mean, for such a flamboyant, in all the best ways, movie, that's a very dry synopsis, I think. Or why don't we take a moment and acknowledge what you're enjoying? You're drinking in October.
Yeah,
beer.
this is called. So this is a good fall beer that I discovered. It's called. It's Land Grant Brewing. I don't know how well that's going to show up, and it is
They're
called.
not paying us for this, by the way.
No, it's
Free.
called Lawn Raker Oktoberfest.
Nice. I am not drinking a beer at the moment. I'm just enjoying a small glass of red wine. Oh, possibly not so small. It's a big red and a big glass. Okay, so Of course, if you're new to the podcast, we spoil these movies. Now,
This
Rocky,
movie came out almost 50 years ago.
it's not like it's a new release, but Chris hadn't seen it.
I had not seen this. So the closest I had gotten to watching this, I was thinking about this as I watched, and I know this was when it was because I remember where I lived when I attempted to watch this the first time. So it was like 99 or 2000. And it was a Friday or Saturday night after a night out, some imbibing. And this was on one of the movie channels. And I tried to watch it and I got about 20 or 30 minutes in and I fell asleep. So that was my last attempt at watching this. Unlike some people, I don't hate musicals. I really like Tommy. We covered Anna and the Apocalypse last Christmas. I really like that a lot. I'll probably watch that again. But, Grease, I never got into. Some of the newer things like Mamma Mia and Chicago and La La Land, it's just kind of not my thing. But so I don't hate musicals, but I wouldn't necessarily seek them out. So that's part of why I had never really watched this. But my initial reaction, so in the very beginning, I was a little bit confused as to the time frame. So we start out with a wedding, and I didn't know if one of the initial songs with Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon starts, and it's and I'll get into this more as we go along. A lot of the songs in this are very, it's like late 50s, early 60s sounding. I don't know what that style is called. It's not really like doo-wop, but yeah, it's kind of that. So I will admit to not loving that style of music, and that kind of affected somewhat my enjoyment of this film. But it starts out and I'm like, is this the 50s? Is it the early 60s? Well, the only indication of time frame is where they're driving in the car and Nixon is on the radio and it's Watergate time.
He's resigning.
Yeah, so this is 73 or whatever, which was when the original stage play was like 73, I think. But that was kind of irrelevant. Like I guess that established the time frame, but it could have been the 50s or 60s.
The mode was certainly, and the male, female, the gender roles that Brad and Janet are ingenue protagonists personify is very much.
They're the straight-laced 50s, 60s
Ward
couple.
and June Cleaver caricature of gender roles and suburban white norms. And it's pretty clear from the makeup and the lyrics that the thing starts out by poking that in the eye.
Right.
The name of the first song is Damn It, Janet. Damn it, Janet, I love you. And it's do 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 do. And it's just campy right off the bat. But yeah, then there's the Nixon thing. So it's a sort of the time. It's not it's super important what time it is, as much as we understand that it's set in this world of those norms. And I interpreted the Nixon speech being on the radio as just an early indicator that some of this stuff was crumbling, right? Because it's Nixon saying it's against my every fiber in my being to resign, but for the good of the country. And of course, by that point, we all knew that he had done it, and he had been lying and cheating and lying about Watergate, and he was only resigning because they were going to impeach him if he didn't.
Yeah.
So, anywho,
but I felt like so we start out with that, where I was a little confused on the timeline, and then figured it out. And so once they get to the castle, I was a little bit. It surprised me a little bit in kind of a positive way that they didn't. I kind of felt like they were going to make the couple the butt of jokes, and they weren't really. There was one scene where Barry Bostwick gets mad, but they kind of just go with it. Like they strip their clothes off and they're just sort of like, okay.
When in Rome.
Yeah,
right.
when in Rome. So
let's just slow down for 1 second. So they are not they're not the couple getting married.
Right.
But
they're in love.
And she catches the bouquet. and I think he proposes to her, right? And so they're driving. I forget where they're driving from, somewhere to somewhere else.
Right.
That's really off the beaten path, and they get caught
get
in
a flat.
thunderstorm and get a flat.
Mm-hmm.
And they find themselves in this sort of dead end road, and these motorcycles have been going by with weird characters on them. And he says, well, let's just go, I'm going to hike up to that. I saw a castle a mile back or something. We're going to see if they have a phone. And she said, I'm coming with you.
Mm-hmm.
So they both show up soaking wet in a rainy, dark and stormy night on the doorstep of this big Gothic looking castle where there's all these motorcycles, and there's clearly something going on inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So they get there. And so once, and it's 15 minutes into the movie, 10, 15 minutes or whatever. Once Tim Curry is on screen, it picks up.
Don't skip over the time warp.
Okay, that's what I was
because that's one of my favorite sequences in the entire movie. Is they open the door, and we know this actor from Dark City.
Yes.
Right? He was one of the best parts of Dark City. And I think this was his movie.
Did he created it. Yeah. He wrote so he's the brainchild behind all of it.
And his name is Quinn?
Timothy. It's not Tim O'Leary.
No.
Tim. Oh, Richard O'Brien. I was close. I was very close.
Quinn O'Brien.
Open another beer.
So he opens the door, and he is the butler, the kind of Igor character. He has a big hunch, and the master would like to, you've arrived on an auspicious evening, and they sort of, well, you better come in, and they come in to the.
Oh, I was trying to get that pouring sound.
That lovely pouring sound. They're ushered into the grand hallway or whatever, and there's everybody that's been on the motorcycles. They're all sort of dressed in similar outfits with sort of platform shoes and kind of shiny latex sort of suits, or it's funky. They all have kind of big.
They had like big plastic sunglasses,
kind of big gonzo glasses,
which looked like the 80s. To me, it was like, wow, they look like characters right out of the 1985.
And they're all different shapes and sizes and colors, and but they all have sort of the same general accoutrement. But they're just getting ready, and they do a big musical number called the Time Warp. And if you know the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you've heard "Let's Do the Time Warp Again,"
and even though I had not seen the film, I mean, I'd probably seen up to that point, but I knew "Let's Do the Time Warp," and I knew the other. I'm a transsexual from Transylvania,
and I
or whatever.
Can't wait to get to that too. But I want to give this its due.
Okay,
so this is an electrifying number, and if you've stuck with the movie this far, which it's not exactly, there's not a hook by today's standards. Like today's, you go to an action movie and there's a huge opening sequence that gets you invested in it, right? We open with some kind of a big thrilling action sequence that lands the hook, and then we establish what's going on here, particularly in an action movie. So the hook in this one is Damn It, Janet, and it's interesting enough for you to be like, and we're not that deep into the movie. To me, the time warp is really the hook. And I was watching it. I haven't seen it in a long time. I was watching it last night and really thinking, this is crazy. You know what I mean? This is just bonkers. It's really catchy. They have, so there's another character in the movie that is it's a narrator who doesn't start the movie off, I don't think. The movie starts off with a pair of like blood red lips, disembodied lips. It's a disembodied mouth, like the Rolling Stones cover, singing about B movies and a double
that was
feature.
Really neat. I liked that.
It's just the lips and teeth singing, and that's really interesting. And then the overtitles are in that, whatever that font is that look like horror font, like it's dripping blood. So right from the beginning, you're like, whoa, this is different.
Let me stop you for just a second with the narrator. So the narrator comes in after the I think basically once they leave the church and they're heading off in the car, the narrator comes in, And you know what I thought was going to happen is because he's the narrator, but I also think he's I think he's supposed to be I can't think of what the term is. What is a person who works in the morgue? That
a mortician?
Not a mortician, but I can't think of what the term is. What, like when somebody's murdered?
Somebody comes and does the crime scene
Yeah.
investigation.
So I think he's listed as that. I could be wrong, but I thought what was going to happen. I thought they were going to die, and that he's telling the story of what happened to them. I thought they were going to be dead at the
Interesting. End. He's in a sort of a library with a globe and big dusty books and wood paneling, and he's got a long cigarette and an arch accent and arch eyebrows and perfectly coiffed silver hair, and he's sort of the very British, but things did not go quite according to plan. It's great, delicious performance. And so then you kind of like, ooh, and that feels so we're with the opening title and these two archetypal characters in the font and everything. We're going, okay, so there's sci-fi, there's like double creature feature, like these they've laid out on the table the ingredients, the color palette they're painting this movie with. And then by the time we get to the castle and we go inside the castle, we get the time warp. And then you think, oh, okay, this is crazy, because it's a big choreographed number, and the narrator gets into it too with escalating excitement, right? Because it's a repeating refrain. If you haven't heard it, it's like it tells you how to do the time warp, which is a dance. You put your hands on your hips, you step to the left, and then a jump to the right. You put your hands on your hips, put your knees in tight, and the pelvic thrust, and it'll drive you insane. Let's do the time warp again. And they repeat it. And as they go, they keep cutting back to various people singing the different parts of the verses. And they cut to the narrator. And now he's up on the desk and he's doing it. And it's just an amazingly awesome sequence, which culminates in this big roll cage elevator in the back of this, central atrium room come rattling down at the end of the song. And we meet our antagonist, who is played by Tim Curry, Dr. Frank.
This is our third Tim Curry movie now. We did Congo and we did Legend.
Right.
So I don't know that
he is
count Congo as a Tim Curry movie.
Well,
but Legend.
He's one of the more memorable parts of it, to be fair.
Yeah. But Legend and this, like, wow, great performances. I mean,
I don't want to offend diehard Tim Curry fan club members, and I know he has had a rich and storied career, but to me, this is the Tim Curry movie.
Yeah, I would say that.
I think he steals.
This is going to be, when Tim Curry, and I hope it's a long time. I mean, I don't think he's in great health anymore, but when Tim Curry passes on, this is going to be, it's going to be like, hey, he was Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I honestly don't know if this film would have worked without Tim Curry holding it together. And there's a lot to talk about, but the charisma and the weirdness and the seduction, and he just is nailing it. When you see a performance where somebody just steals the show, that's what he's doing here. He just runs away with it. You almost can't keep up with him. And there were several times I rewound and wanted to watch his delivery of what would otherwise be an unremarkable line, how he just made a meal out of every little moment he possibly could, from a facial expression to a raised eyebrow to a sneer to a triumphant grin that sort of curdles into jealousy. I mean, it was just a tour de force. So anyway, he comes down and he is Dr. Frank Furter, and he does the second great musical number of this, which is I don't know what the title of it is, but the chorus is I'm just a sweet transvestite transsexual. Well, I'm just a sweet transvestite
from transsexual Transylvania,
which we learn what that means later.
But he has a big cape on, and he takes it off, and he's wearing a corset, and the thigh high stockings.
So he's dressed like, in female dress, really I don't know how you would describe it. I keep thinking of the Hellfire Club from Marvel.
Yeah,
Comics.
yeah. But
they had the White
black,
Queen and
yeah.
the Black Queen, and
It's
they were
it
more or less
dressed
wearing
exactly like that.
that 50s lingerie, the full head to toe deal with the high heels and everything. His hair's grown is like shoulder length, these curls, and he's wearing this
Black
almost
lipstick.
black, but it's like purple, really incredibly. It's really drag makeup, eye makeup and lipstick, and he comes down and his accent is this very posh British, right? Come rein to the heis, like it's so arch.
Mhm.
And then the song, of course, as you might guess from the title, is just crazy and pushes all kinds of buttons. Which,
And here's
I
the
also
thing.
want to talk about how well you think that stood up in 2021. Now that we're having conversations about gender identity and everything else, but
Well, I think it's pretty remarkable, really. And I did just, I mean, we don't do a lot of research, but I tried to,
we don't do a lot of research.
I tried to find some reaction to this at the time. I mean, there were critics' reviews, but you have to think, okay, this was 46 years ago. Maybe it bombed when it was released in theaters. So
I imagine people didn't know what to make of it.
But yeah, you would have to think maybe they just didn't know about it. But if they did, I could just imagine. I mean, almost if this were released now in theaters, could you imagine what like Fox News and things would be saying about this? And this is almost 50 years later. So I think if any, again, maybe they just didn't know about it, but I think if religious groups knew about this at time, their heads had to be exploding. But when kind of the more things change, the more that they stayed the same. As I watched this afternoon, and as I was watching this, there's all this reaction online to there's going to be a new Hellraiser film, and they cast, instead of Doug Bradley, who was in most of the other Hellraiser movies as Pinhead, they cast a trans actress to play Pinhead. And some people are like, oh, that's great. And then other people, not surprisingly, online were just losing their shit over this, that, they're going to. So it's like we're 50 years later. And, I just thought, here's this beloved by a segment of the populace film from 46 years ago, but still people are not accepting of a trans actress playing, it's just, have we progressed that much in 46 years,
So the rest of the movie, there aren't the big slam dunk, maybe the Meatloaf number, but otherwise, in terms of musical numbers, those are the two singles of this movie to me, and the Meatloaf number would be a third, but it almost feels like a subplot because it's almost a cameo. Meatloaf is also in this. So just to briefly summarize most of the rest of the movie, he says, come up to the lab, see what's on the slab.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Frankenstein. He's made a man. He's made a gorgeous beefcake guy that is clear he intends as a sexual puppet, really.
And this to give you a part
named Rocky.
Well, yeah.
Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah. So I didn't know that. So I was like, oh, I felt
What's
like
his title mean?
I felt like an idiot, but I was like, I never really thought about what the title meant. And I was like, oh, okay, that's where the title came from. Because I didn't know the character was named Rocky.
Yeah.
So.
And really, I mean, I don't know, horror picture show. Horror is the kind of genre and picture shows. So it's really the Rocky horror movie. It was about Rocky. And anyway, so that wasn't Frankenstein, but Rocky.
Well, let me say something really quickly about that. That was another thing that was interesting about that made it seem, even though it seemed dated in some ways, not necessarily the filmmaking was dated, but it was this kind of 50s, 60s throwback. Rocky was definitely not the typical body type of 1975, even for like action stars and things like that. They were kind of more almost like we'd call today like a dad bod or whatever. So that actor, which this was some research that I found, that was not that guy's voice. So they cast him strictly based on his looks.
Interesting.
And he couldn't sing, and they also didn't like his speaking voice, so they dubbed his speaking and his singing, which the guy did a really good job lip syncing, I noticed. But that the body type of that guy is like the action heroes now, like what's viewed as the ideal body type.
No body fat, shredded,
2021,
12 pack, just ripped. And Schwarzenegger, if you get into pumping iron,
but at the time they were viewed as like freaks. Then
but that movement was part of making it mainstream. But you're right. This would have been considered a little
excessive,
abnormal,
right?
Well, even Janet has a line. He says,
"I don't like too many muscles."
Says, "What do you think of him?" Mm-hmm. And she says, "I don't like a man with too many muscles." And he makes
it's not for
face like,
you.
"What you don't know what you're talking about." Yeah,
he's not for you.
So from there, what we get is, to me, for the first time, things start to get a little complicated, because one of the sort of missions of this movie is to take all of this gender and sexuality stuff out on the table and chop it up a little bit, and have fun with it, but also rub it in our faces and mess around with our right. So not just Janet and Brad's norms, who are kind of this Barbie and Ken, but clearly those of the audience as well. And so the idea of a person creating another person that he, intends to use in a certain way sexually. I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot in this movie that seems kind of rapey.
Well, yeah. And I would, yeah.
And you think,
talk about the one scene.
Yeah.
With the kind of veil.
Yeah. So there's a couple of those scenes. In the first one, so Frankenfurter appears at night. Everybody goes to their bedrooms, and the boudoir is set up with this sort of draped, there's sort of a pink light, and there's the canopy bed screens it from us. And Janet is in bed, and someone who looks like Brad comes in when it's Brad's voice, and he gets in bed with her, and she's like, "Oh, you know what? We haven't even gotten married yet," or whatever. And he's being very aggressive with her. She believes it's Brad, of course. I mean, to us, it is Brad. Mm-hmm. The way they do this is just a switcheroo, where at the moment they're sort of beginning to consummate this. And it happens very fast. It's not super graphic, but it's clear what's going on.
There's some thrusting and shadows, but
and
silhouette.
And the sort of wig comes off. Mm-hmm. And you can recognize immediately, suddenly they've switched it out, and it's Frankenfurter because it's his silhouette, his voice now, and his hair. And she said, "Oh, you tricked me," or whatever. And he says, "Oh, come on, you can't admit it was all that bad." And he sort of, for lack of a better term, he kind of plows through her resistance, and then she kind of comes around to it and decides,
she giggles, and she's like,
gives
just
into
don't
it,
tell him.
Kind of does enjoy it, exactly, just don't tell him. So they consummate this, and then something distracts him. The guy rings a buzzer and says, "Oh, Rocky's escaped," or something. Anyway, the scene repeats, and he goes and does it with Brad. He appears
almost the identical dialogue.
Exactly. So I think it's less jarring because we've already seen it, and you're getting a comic thing that is being repeated. And somehow I don't feel, I don't know how to, maybe these are just my own hangups, but I didn't feel like it felt like such a violation when he came in dressed as, masquerading as her, and then it turned out to be him. It didn't feel like such a betrayal somehow on that second time.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same way. Yeah.
And Brad's kind of like, because the twist is like, "Oh, come on, Brad, you kind of always wanted this." And Brad is sort of like, "Well," and Brad gets into it.
I don't know if it's just because you think of, and these are, gender norms, but you think of a woman as being less able to resist than a man would be to rape essentially, or sexual assault, or,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm
not to resist, but to stop.
sure. I personally still have some more work to do in that regard, but I'm just talking about my personal response to the movie.
Yeah,
was kinda
I felt exactly the same
"Ooh."
way.
So, but I mean, carrying on, we might refer back to this. So we go on. So you've got this, and Rocky doesn't seem into it. Like there's a scene in which Frankenfurter is chasing Rocky around shortly after he comes out of the bandages, and he's like, "This, this is why I created you for it." He's like, "Oh," and you're kind of like, he's just not into it.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we start to see, okay, so it's a Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a crazy sex comedy switcheroo, comedy of errors stuff. Goes on for a while. Then we sort of figure out that they're aliens,
Mhm.
right? That's the next penny to drop. That somebody
The professor comes in, or doctor, or
the
whatever.
professor comes in, but at one point the Igor character, the butler character, drops something about Earthlings or something,
Mhm.
and he's like,
I mean, yeah,
right. So then you're like, oh, okay, and it turns out that they are from another planet, and
the planet transsexual, or the planet transvestite,
Something-
transsexual in the galaxy, transvestite.
exactly, the planet is called
Transylvania.
Transsexual, and the galaxy is called Transylvania or
Mhm.
something, which is where that comes from. Which whatever. So, correct me if I miss any other major plot points, but then the last big reveal is that so the butler has a sister, and they're kind of fun characters throughout, and they're servants.
Did you? This is not who the actress was, but I kept thinking that's Madeline Kahn, but it wasn't.
She had that
Not Madeline Kahn, but shoot.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Just go ahead, and
I can't think of her name now either.
From the
Rosanna Dana. Yeah.
No.
Oh no.
Yeah, just continue.
Well, I don't know who you thought it was, but anyway, it wasn't either of them. The switcheroo is that
Bernadette Peters. I kept thinking she was Bernadette Peters. I knew she wasn't, but
the switcheroo is that now they're in charge. They've been promoted, and Frankenfurter's mission has failed, and they've been charged. Well, what he says is, we are returning to Transylvania. And then actually, I want to take it back, because there is a third big number that Tim Curry gets to do, which is I'm Going Home.
So for me, so it was interesting. I saw so I knew, we were going to be doing this at some point. And I just randomly saw a tweet from someone, and they said, well, it's time for me to watch Rocky Horror again. And I'm going to watch the first 45 minutes or whatever, an hour, and then I'm just going to zone out for the last 30 minutes. And me being a newbie to this, maybe this is blasphemous for people who are big fans of this. Once they hit the stage at the end, that was by far my favorite part of the whole film, because basically even the time warp, I didn't really care about any of the musical numbers that were not Tim Curry. And I thought his performance in the end, where there's tears streaming down and everything. And there's really great shot where he's in a pool, and it has on the bottom of the pool is the creation painting. I just thought all of that was dynamite. Yeah. I mean, it gets a little more serious. They've kind of dropped the 50s, 60s music. It's more contemporary 70s music.
And now I'm remembering actually that part that is really a lull that this anonymous tweeter referenced is there's a professor that shows up that Brad knows from before, a guy in a wheelchair who is on to Frankenfurter and knows the deal. But Frankenfurter then starts toying with all four of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a dinner scene where they're all kind of making nice. Like the jig is up, but then suddenly it's dinner time and they're all sitting at the dinner table.
At that part.
And he's sort of messing with all of them. And you realize they're all kind of under a spell. Like he has some sort of control over them. He turns them one by one. He turns them to stone with a Medusa ray, right? Which is, I mean, upsetting might be too strong a word, but suddenly he's turning these characters to stone, and you're like, oh my god!
Mm-hmm.
And then he turns them back. He can un-Medusa them, but you don't know that at the time. And who does he do first? I think he turns Brad to stone first.
Mm-hmm.
And Janet sees, her fiance get turned to stone, and she's terrified, right? And then the professor gets turned to stone, and then she gets turned to stone, and Frankenfurter is enjoying their distress. I think he's a cat enjoying toying with these mice. And they're up on stage with him now. They're in the full garb with the corset and
they're dressed
thigh
just like him.
highs, and they're part of his musical number, like marionettes, Rocky included. Even the guy in the wheelchair who now has gorgeous gams that he can somehow they're like puppets. They're like marionettes on a string.
Mm-hmm.
As part of this number, and that's when the brother and sister burst in, and they're now in their intergalactic outfits, and he's got a kind of a pitchfork ray gun, and he says, we're in charge now. Your mission has been deemed a failure, and we're going back to Transylvania. And he does this, believing that he too is part of We, does this big kind of diva encore number. I'm going home, with the mascara running down the face, and
I love that part.
It's a triumphant scene, at the end of which the guy goes, "Oh, you must have misunderstood me. I mean, whatever. We're going back. We're going back. We're going to kill you." And he zaps him, and Rocky grabs him in a Frankenstein kind of way, and is now protecting him, and the ray gun,
carrying him up the arcade,
climbing up the thing, and they're zapping him. And the little red, it's not even CGI. It's just
they probably hand drew them in, like the original
zaps.
Star Wars. Yeah.
Zapping off the thing, and I guess he says, for the crime of murder, right? What was the?
I forget exactly what the crime was that they.
And I thought at the moment, I was like, of all the crimes he's committed in this movie, in this hour and a half we've been watching him, they're only judging him on the one. Like, he only crossed the line when he killed somebody. I'm trying to remember who he killed. He killed
Meatloaf.
He killed Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Right. Meatloaf comes out and he's in deep freeze, and he kind of rides out in a motorcycle, and he's a rockabilly guy, and has this kind of meatloafy number. And then I guess Frankenfurter, angry that he didn't stay dead, or angry that he's kind of stealing the spotlight or whatever, grabs a pickaxe really, and sort of chases him back into the ice box, and in a true slasher movie style, just kind of murders him. And later at the dinner table, they whip off the tape, and it's sort of his corpse that they've been eating him. They have it looks like a ham. And he says, "Oh, what about?" And it was his nephew or something.
Yeah.
The guy in the wheelchair. He's like, "What about?" What was his name? I keep wanting to say Rocky, but it wasn't, and it wasn't Meatloaf.
Oh, Meatloaf's Eddie.
He says, "Oh, what about Eddie?" And he goes, "That's a tender subject." In the mid carb, and you realize, oh God, it's Eddie. They pull it off, and there's his sort of corpse with big hunks cutting out of it that they've clearly been eating. So cannibalism and rape and all kinds of things done in a campy way, but with enough teeth that you sit there and you go, I don't remember these themes of this movie. Like, when I saw this as a much younger person, I just thought this is a campy romp of ridiculousness. And now watching it now, I'm kind of like, it's pretty dark, really.
I read an interesting, a little aside with Meatloaf. So he was in the original musical, the original stage presentation in England. And I don't know if this is true or not, but this was a thing that I read, but they said that they cast him based on his singing ability. And I guess he didn't read the script very closely. And he was just like, I can sing. And they were doing a performance, and Tim Curry comes out in the full outfit, and he didn't know that's what it was going to be, and he ran away.
By the opening performance, he's never seen a dress rehearsal?
Supposedly. I mean, maybe they were doing a dress rehearsal. I don't know, but they said supposedly he saw that and he ran away. and like they had to like talk him into coming back, but I guess the audience liked him so much that that kind of won him over. But that could be an urban legend. I don't know. That's what I read online.
Strains credibility with me, but I guess it makes a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I don't know how much time you want to spend trying to unpack some of that stuff. The movie is clearly it's clearly playing with tropes of horror. Okay, so
Sure.
fair game. It's playing with tropes of camp from the double feature creature things. So fair game. Like, it's all fair game. I think it's kind of a masterpiece. The thing is this so specific a vision that it deserves its cult status. I don't know I don't feel necessarily like it. I think it did a lot of this stuff at least half to shock.
Yes.
And not to be like, this is a think piece designed to start conversation. But it was definitely the way in which it wanted to shock was to turn norms on their ear and sort of delight in doing so. In the way that, of course, drag culture has become much more mainstream now.
Yeah. So to us, it's not, it's not such a big deal now, but I just imagine that there had to have been people. I think, a little aside here, my parents went to see on a date because they had read reviews of it. Went to see Clockwork Orange. And they still every once in a while will talk about that today as what a terrible movie, and that's a movie that still, kind of holds up today.
Well,
it's still shocking,
It was terrible from the angle of like terror. Like,
right.
I mean, it's a masterpiece of a movie, but there are really terrible moments where it makes you feel terrible.
Right.
Deliberately.
But I can imagine my parents having gone, if my parents had seen reviews, Rocky Horror Picture Show, this was great. Like, they would have their brains would have melted. I mean, so that's, as we kind of started out with the beginning, there had to have been, very mainstream people at the time who just went to see this not knowing what it was and were just like, the world is ending, For us now, with 46 years of progress and a lot of these barriers have been broken down, it doesn't seem shocking to us now. But
it was subversive. It was designed clearly. It was made with that very delightfully in hand, like that we're going to subvert all of these expectations and all of these comfortable norms, and and I think it does that. All of those uncomfortable things included, it still stands up as a movie. And
I think if I showed this, I don't know how you feel with your parents, but if I showed this to my parents, they would just be like, "What is this? Why are you showing us this horrible thing?"
Wouldn't have any interest in this whatsoever.
So I still think older people, particularly in America, would be very affected by this. It'd just be like, this is a weird, gross movie.
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit of Pee-wee's Playhouse in that was conceived as a stage production. That Pee-wee.
Well, and Pee-wee was for adults initially. It was on HBO, or his specials were on HBO, so it wasn't for kids,
right? But it was very much in the style of the. The follow through of making a kid show of that world. Like, what if it really was for kids? Like, kids would love this if you took the sharper teeth out of it.
Right.
Like, kids would think it was great. Keep the attitude and keep the mischief, but dial down the rating some. And I thought that the Pee-wee's Kids Show was still pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
But the original thing was a stage production. Yes. And then they're like this, then he made a feature film out of it. And the feature film retains all of the same. It's crazy, and you've never seen anything like it. You're like, what is this? This, it doesn't fit a model, like, it's a buddy cop movie. This is it's the man-child
rom-com.
Like, what it's a road film, I guess, is the closest thing you could
it is a road film.
but this made me think of that a little bit. That
Yeah.
it's so theatrical and is a musical, and then they made a movie of it, and the movie feels so specific and so realized. Yeah, I don't know where I was. That's, I guess, the end of my thought. But so, I mean, would you recommend it?
Yeah. So, it's definitely for certain audiences, people who don't like musicals. If you don't like musicals, you're not going to like this. And so my reaction to it would be,
It's not a great musical either. Let's be frank. I mean,
yeah, like,
don't send me hate mail for saying that. You know what I'm saying? Les Miserables, it is not, right? It's
and I wouldn't sit around and listen to these songs. Like, I brought up Tommy in the beginning, and I haven't listened to it a long time, but like when I was in college, I had the CD of Tommy. There's a lot of really good songs on there. This I wouldn't, like I said, and this is kind of blasphemous for the big fans. The Time Warp, I didn't really care that much about, but the songs that Tim Curry performs, I really enjoyed, especially that ending part. I was just knocked out by. The rest of it, I was just kind of like, this is fine.
Yeah.
And some of it, I just sort of felt like, I don't even know why this needs to be a musical. This could just be dialogue.
That's why when you say this is a musical, that's why I'm like,
it's not constant
technically
singing,
it's a musical because it's a bunch of songs strung together to tell the story. But the songs, many of the songs feel extremely half-assed to me. And there are some, there are some great numbers, and Tim Curry really sells it. I would recommend it if you know anything about this film and you haven't seen it. I think you're not immediately turned off by what you already know about it, because it's all that and more. I'd recommend that you watch it because it is 50 years old, and a lot of, I was just about to say a lot of the prophecies in it come true, but that's not. This movie isn't making, but a lot of the things it deals with are much more mainstream parts of mainstream conversations now.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting to see the way in which this movie, which had to know that it would really only appeal to an underground audience, it had to know that. It delights in that. It's not really for everyone else. This one's for us, the ones who get it, so there's a delightful mischief in it that relishes in, like, oh, they wouldn't air this on the big networks,
but it's pretty incredible that it flopped really badly, and then in the late 70s it got resurrected with the midnight screenings, and it's done $170 million since then.
Yeah.
And so I would say, I will admit the musical parts that Tim Curry wasn't the focal point of, I was kind of like, okay, let's just move on they went on a little long to me, and I was ready for the next part. But I overall enjoyed it. I'm glad. I don't know that I'm going to revisit this anytime. I'm glad it was kind of like not like a bucket list thing, but it's like I checked that off.
Sure.
It's like, oh, I finally saw Rocky
Now
Horror.
that we're doing a podcast about movies,
we can do this kind of stuff.
You got to do it.
It is it's the definition of a cult film. Some of the cult films are, I think of, just to throw something out, like Eraserhead. I don't know. Have you ever seen Eraserhead?
No.
I like David Lynch, but Eraserhead, I had a hard time with. But this is a cult film, but it's still enjoyable. Tim Curry steals the movie. He's amazing. I would say, if I ever would watch this again, and this would not necessarily be something that would be like, hey, I definitely want to do this for sure. But if I ever had the opportunity to see one of the midnight screenings, this would be. Have you ever done that?
I saw The Room.
Oh, okay.
That way. I have been to a midnight screening of this. Screaming. But to me, I was thinking, okay, there is going to a concert, and there's the experience of that. And then there's watching a video of a concert is not the same thing. Right.
So I would imagine seeing this with a theater full of people who are really into this, it would probably be fun.
It would probably be fun. I enjoyed watching this thing again and just by myself and really taking it in as a film. Like it'd be like, okay, so a director made this.
I mean, we didn't talk any about this at all. It's shot well and it's acted well.
Yeah.
You know, there's some neat sets and things like that.
Yeah.
I think this would, I watched this at 3 p.m. on my couch. This would probably benefit from some substances of whatever your choice of substance that you would like. I imagine, I'm sure a lot of people that at the midnight screenings or had some drinks or they're high or whatever, and so I think it would probably benefit from that. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend it too, with the caveats of, there are definitely people that aren't going to like this, but
it's an hour and a half to
it breezes by. I felt,
it's an hour and a half, but it feels a little stretched. I mean, there's places where there's sort of, where the plot is driving it along, and then there's other places where that's not happening, and you're kind of like, oh, there's another song here. Like, do we need another song right now? What happens next?
I just felt like I was all along. It was fine. This is entertaining. And then that last 25 minutes or so, I was really hooked with that. I really enjoyed all of that because that was kind of all Tim Curry.
Yep.
So,
and I agree. I would also say that, unless what you know about the film is a disqualifier for you, that Tim Curry's performance alone is worth.
I mean, I think that ending is like, borderline Oscar worthy, where he's, just the tears and all that. I just really enjoyed that.
That's certainly what they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'd give him an Oscar for it, but it's a masterful performance, right? So in that sense, he is always doing something. It's difficult to take your eyes off of him in the movie.
Yeah.
When he's on screen, even when he's not the center of the scene, he's doing something interesting. And I love that. That's a theatrical thing in this sort of, in a comedy and something campy, there's frequently a competition of who can steal the scene. And Frank, if this is your scene and you let that guy in the background steal it from you, well, shouldn't have let him steal. Why'd you let him steal it? And then
I was thinking
that the audience loves to watch people trying to, pull focus.
I was thinking about Richard O'Brien, he's the creator of it, wrote it. He's in the film. And I just was kind of thinking, like, I don't know if generous is the right term, but it's like, he's just there and he just lets Tim Curry, just go with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's what we thought. Do you have any sense of what we're going to do for next time?
I don't. There were a couple of, so I've watched, we talked a little bit about it. I've watched some of, not Ghost in the Shell, but Ghost in the Machine, which I think would be a pretty fun, because it's a very ridiculous film. Some things, like, I'll just see, it'll come up on Twitter or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, I've never seen that before. I said something one day about the Witches of Eastwick. I've never seen the Witches. I've never seen that before.
I think I saw it when I was a kid. I don't remember much about it.
We haven't really done that's like a comedy. We haven't really done anything like that. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm down for any of that. I don't have something that has floated at the surface of my mind as something that I want to do. So I'd be down to watch any of those if you have one that's been chewing at you.
Okay. We'll just kind of think about it. But I know it's still a couple of weeks, but I think it's the 22nd that Dune comes out. Are you going to see Dune in the theater, or are you going to watch it?
I don't know where I'm going to see it, but I'm going to see it.
So that's once we get to that, we'll cover that.
I almost hesitate to do Dune on here because we're going to spoil it right off the bat. And
I think we just do the caveat of we spoil.
Okay.
So.
I really, really can't wait to
we did the original one, and that,
that's true. It's the same story.
Same story. I don't know if they make any major changes or anything.
In fact, it's only the first half of it, as I understand that. I even get all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So Chris talk movies at gmail.com. That's how you can get a hold of us and let us know what you think about what we said and what you think we ought to do next. And
If you watch us on YouTube, if you're watching this right now, please like and subscribe on YouTube because that helps us. Or if you're doing the audio only version, wherever you get your podcasts, please like and subscribe there as well.
Yes.
Because that helps us.
Yes, it helps us, not financially, it just helps us get more listeners, and that's why we're doing this, because it's fun.
Yeah. And if you have suggestions for films to do, we're open to whatever.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Yeah, within reason. All right, everybody. So I guess we haven't landed on quite what we're going to do next week, but it's going to be maybe one of those ones we were talking about. And so we'll leave you in suspense. But unless you have anything else to add,
That's it.
we will talk to you next week.